Welcome to the Gravel Lot, the place where bikes are for everyone.
The Gravel Lot podcast is presented by Be Free Ride Bikes Apparel, providing a fully customized cycling apparel experience to provide you and your team the attention to detail and personal touch that you deserve.
And also brought to you by Grimpour Brothers Coffee, offering handmade coffee roasted weekly in small batches to give you the finest quality coffee to start your day. Choose their subscription service and earn your free bag of coffee today.
Also by BioWheels Fit Studio and Workshop in Cincinnati, Ohio, offering you a full host of bike fitting services intended to provide the cycling enthusiast with the most efficient, comfortable, and sustainable bike fit they have ever had.
And by the Ritual All Natural Skincare, providing small batch, handmade chamois cream, custom blended for your team or shop right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Contact us today to learn more.
And by Hand Up Gloves. Great gear, better times. Providing a wide range of apparel for bikes, snow sports, and golf in multiple designs and fits to let your personality shine.
Our goal with the Gravel Lot is to inspire cyclists of all stripes to ride bikes, share their story, and have fun. We love all bikes and anyone who wants to ride them. So no matter where you sit on the spectrum of bikes, we'll always have a place for you in the Gravel Lot.
And now, the hosts of TGL, John Woolry and Doug McClintock.
Hello and welcome back once again to the Gravel Lot, the official podcast for all things cycling. I'm John, that's Doug, and we are glad that you found us. So whether you are an existing Pebble or you are entirely new to the show and are wondering why I said Pebble, we're all Pebbles in this Gravel Lot of life that is within this rectangle as well as outside of the rectangle. We're all Pebbles in the Gravel Lot of life. So welcome to our Gravel Lot of this weird podcasting internet world.
Yes.
So now that I've made it like nice and awkward here at the beginning,
It's good. I appreciate it.
Let's talk about what is the Gravel Lot here. It's a show where we love telling stories. Yes, we love bikes. We love all of our community. We love all of our bike family. But I think for us, it is hearing the stories from amazing people doing really cool stuff within the bike world, hearing how they got there, what made them, the things that have changed their path along the way, and really what is their story and what is their unique superpower that they're bringing to the world of bikes. And that is something that we love bringing to you guys with each and every episode. So if you like what you hear today, hit the notifications, hit the subscribe button, do all the things that the internet rewards. At this point, at this point, you know what you need to do, whether it's hit the little bell, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, whatever that thing is, and then share it with all your bike friends, because really that's what all of this is, because we're trying to build a bigger community around the Gravel Lot and honestly these like cool bike stories. So let's do this together. Make sure you leave your comments below. If there's something that we're talking about during the show today and you want to make a comment on it, feel free. The comments are open. Send us your comments. Hit up the links in our show notes to support the sponsors that you just heard about. Check out our website. Check out the Etsy store where you can find some cool merch for the Gravel Lot or other things that have become kind of show canon. And if you have questions on what some of those things are and you don't understand what they are, hit us up. Hit up the comments.
We'll tell you what episode it's in, and then you can go back.
Exactly. Then you can go back and look at the back catalog, because there are a lot of episodes in the back catalog.
Exactly. And in addition to looking through our back catalog in our little corner of the internet, like John said, make sure to check out everybody we mentioned in the opening. They are amazing people that support what we do and enable us to continue to do it. We had to buy some new technology this week, so we're on that. And that is all due to sponsorship support and our Patreon. So if you want to become a Patreon supporter, please go to our Patreon. Camber says go to our Patreon. They are fired up. They got a new bone, but they only got one of them, and it has like 3 nubs on it, and they are probably fighting over it, and no one is downstairs, so not my problem. At any rate, it's their problem. They'll sort it out. Pack Dynamics. At any rate, if you want to send us questions or feedback, you can use the form on our website. You can hit us up on all the social medias. We are happy to respond. We love talking to y'all. Or you can call us at 513-400-5577 and leave us a good message or a heckling message. But just like at least give us some clues so we can identify you, because I think that helps us heckle you back.
If you want help, if you just want to get something off your chest,
that's cool. It's like that line that people scream into, but don't do that.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's like going to talk to a therapist, except we're not going to respond back if you're just like dumping your like brain chaos on us.
If you do scream into it, I wonder what Google Translate will do.
Oh, I do honestly like getting the emails of Google trying to make
Good
sense of
parse human
what
speech.
somebody's saying. That's always interesting every time those come through.
It keeps getting better. At any rate, do that. We'd love to hear from you. With all that stuff out of the way, John, how has your ride been this week?
Well, you mentioned part of it. So my last day with my previous company was Friday, which meant just all of the tying up loose ends things. I think the way that it works is I have health insurance through the end of this month. But going through all of that this week, I have a week between when I ended and when I begin my new position. So we're in like a weird no man's land. Some of the technology that we were using was from that job. So yes, as Doug said, we've had to invest some money, which is good. I think the more that we can be self-sustaining and not be beholden to any of our own day-to-day jobs, good. It's a good thing. But yeah, other than that, really looking forward to the opportunity, but also looking forward to this weekend going north to Alma, Michigan to go ride bikes with some of our existing friends are going up there, but also we're going to go meet a lot of new friends. And I'm really, really looking forward to that. We're setting up and we're basically kind of doing the swag bag giveaways Saturday morning. So if you're riding Alma and you're going to go pick up your bag at registration, you're going to meet us. So that's great. And we're going to try and recruit you to come on our 50K ride because it's going to be a blast.
Even if you don't come on our 50K ride, we're still going to eat the food afterwards and spend our bucks. There's still space, right? There's still space available in the Alma, Glen Gravel, Glen Ramble, Glen Close, Glen Etman, who's my friend from high school. Rides, like there's still space to register. So if you want to get up to Michigan, it's a short drive from the Ohio area, or if you are up in Michigan, get up there. I've seen the course profiles. They are not terrible.
Yeah, they are very, very beginner friendly. And that's
Yeah.
the whole premise of the group ride that we're leading is if you are at all nervous about doing this for your first event, find us and we will make sure that you make it. So Doug, that's me. Took up a lot of time. I got a lot of changes going on in my life. How was your ride this week?
My ride has been good. Just dealing with crazy stuff, wedding, all that sort of stuff is still happening. Ellen went kind of out of town this weekend, so I had some like quasi bachelor time, which
Doug didn't know what to do with himself.
I didn't know what to do with myself. I mean, but this is the thing for the past year and a half, everyone's been with their partner or their roommates or whomever they've been in this kind of bubble with, and to not have them around was kind of an interesting mental challenge on Thursday. A much better time on Friday, and Saturday I just cleaned the entire house and it was perfect when Ellen came home. So that was good. But it was good. We had a chill time Saturday night and Sunday and just kind of hung out. But I'm excited because late last week on Friday, Thursday, I rode my bike to work. And one of the reasons I haven't been riding a lot to work, especially this summer, is because we don't have a shower at work anymore. So I rejoined the YMCA, which is like 3 blocks from work and easy roll, so that I could shower after my 10-mile ride into work. And also so that I could work out. And today I was in the gym getting diesel, getting yoked, lifting some weights, drinking some protein shakes, getting broed out. No, but like I
like to say that it's picking things up and putting things down. That's essentially what I'm doing. I'm not accomplishing anything more than that.
I think the excitement is that I have been so slow to be able to like pick up being exercise oriented again during the pandemic. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like riding my bike a ton. I was on the trainer a ton. Had a coach, and that just needed to stop because I was like digging myself a weird hole. And now I'm like approaching it on my terms. And it's nice to be doing that. Like, I feel like I'm approaching riding and working out on my terms, not in a space that I was before. And I think it's taken me a year plus to figure that out. And that's good. Like, I'm feeling really chill about it. So that's been a nice piece for me this week.
It's tough, but the cool thing about that is I think, because that's something that I spent the beginning part of the pandemic kind of doing as well for myself, is I think
you kind of flip-flopped with me a little bit.
Yeah, and I think for me it was like losing my job at the beginning of the pandemic was like a huge shock to my ego, which meant that like, what could I control? And it's like I could control like checking the box every day of doing the workout that either I prescribe for myself or Pete prescribed for me. So, but also approaching it in terms of like, what can I keep doing instead of like, what do I stress out thinking that like, oh man, this is going to be really hard. And then when I'm done, I'm like, okay, that was good. But then you're already like building the anticipation towards the next one. Whereas this is like, that's good. I did enough and I'm ready to do it again. If it's like lift weights, jog, lift weights, run, or like ride, whatever that cadence is, like it just becomes more sustainable. And I think it's something that we all struggle with finding.
Yeah, so I'm excited to find that cadence, but I will say this. So joining the gym allows me to like ride my bike in, hop in, go down, hit the locker room, take a shower. And today, after I was done working out in the gym, I was taking a shower, and there were these two older gentlemen. I could just tell by the things they were talking about, like which has the better ravioli dinner. Is it Pompilio's or is it La Rosa's? And they decided on La Rosa's because you get more, right? Like this whole conversation is transpiring as I am lathering myself up and cleaning myself in the shower. And I go to exit, like the shower has like a curtain and then there's a little vestibule and another curtain. And I go to exit the second curtain and I got my towel on and everything. And I nearly walk into a like 5'5" naked old man. I just almost bump right into him. He's standing right in front of my thing. And I'm like, oh, and like personal space is a thing to begin with, right? But also the pandemic, and I'm not used to, like, I still dodge people.
That is next level
and
personal
I was like,
space.
and he was like straight up naked with the towel over his shoulder. And I was like, yay. And like, it just set me back. And I hope I didn't like have a weird reaction, but I was like, oh, excuse me.
Sounds like yeah, that you like lived a scene from Seinfeld is essentially what like
very much
lived so. Right. A scene straight out of Seinfeld.
So that was my morning.
So
didn't eat coffee. I was
no, yeah, personal anxieties. Last thing before we start, because today I'm looking really, really forward to today. Ever since we've booked this one, I am really excited about today's guest. But short little shout out here. I'm wearing the Life on Two Wheels shirt today because Chris Creed, amazing person, putting amazing things out into the world, doing things that people don't necessarily think are wise spends. And almost a decade ago, he found a junior kid that he thought had a future. And a couple days ago, that kid won a stage in the Tour de France. And I like watching it unfold. I could not, like, I had so many emotions, and it's not even somebody that I've invested my time in. It's somebody that has come from people that I care about and people that I know are trying to put great things out into the world. And it is like a crystallization on so many different levels, not only an American winning a stage in the Tour, but it was a climbing stage and it ended on a descent. And it's all of the things that we haven't been good at as a country. And we have a rider that is capable of that. So Sepp and Chris, like, the future for Skinny Tires, I feel like is in good hands with that young man.
The dogs agree. They're going absolutely bat crazy downstairs. So I mean, I can't put it better. You're absolutely right. Sepp, congratulations. This is great to see so many good Continental folks coming up Rusty Woods with some really hard work this week. And it's just good to see people succeeding in all those sort of places. It's nice to see people achieving. So without further ado, we will get to this week's interview. And, in addition to the way that the things have been going, we have another referral this week, as it were. It seems like all our referrals from previous guests have been absolutely on point, and we are very excited to welcome to the show this week. He is probably one of the originators of the ultra endurance feats of cycling amazement right here in the modern era. And he is the first person to set an unsupported Great Divide mountain bike race. I think he did in like 18 days and 5 hours. And I think that stood for like 5 years. So kudos to that. And he's won a ton of major titles and races and achievements, and so many of them in this ultra endurance space that we could just direct you to his Wikipedia page. Go look at that. That'll probably explain some of this.
Yeah, it
But,
checks a lot of boxes for sure.
yeah, but he is a member of the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame. But best of all, and most important to us, is he's still out here testing himself against himself. We are beyond honored to have John Stamstad join us today. John, welcome to TGL.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's really an honor to be a part of the gravel lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're like I said in the intro, we're like, ever since we booked this, I am really looking forward to it. So thanks to you guys for recommending it. And also thanks to Ian Mullins. You guys know him. Hopefully you love him by now.
Absolutely.
He allegedly made an appearance on last week's show. Go back and listen to that. See if you can figure out where that actually fits in. But making the connection, like that's the beauty of our small little cycling fiefdom, is that cool people like you are only one or two people away. So thank you for sitting down to join us, and I am stoked to hear some of the stories and to kind of noodle around in your brain a little bit, I think.
We promise to be gentle.
Sounds fun.
So I've read a lot of your interviews and pieces that have been done over time, and I think this isn't something that I was able to find, and I'm curious. We always like to level set with folks about where people discovered bikes. The first record I have of John Stamstad and bikes is you cycling across Missouri, but they must have been in your space earlier in that. Where did bikes inject themselves into your world?
Not that much earlier than that. I was in college in University of Wisconsin, Madison. A friend of mine who was a bike racer guy invited me out on a bike ride, and I was total novice, had a bike but didn't really ride. Took me out on a 100-mile bike ride, and of course my legs cramped and I fell apart and it was a disaster. But I enjoyed myself, and he and I got to talking that we had both always kind of since kids dreamt of bike touring. Because then that was, I don't know, maybe 1984, 1985, somewhere in there. And that was, bike touring was kind of a thing then. And so a month later, he and I rode from Wisconsin to Colorado. And in doing that, I brought a book to read. We were going to do it kind of casually, I guess, or, didn't really have a plan. We were just going to do it and see how it went. Well, riding your bike across Iowa and Nebraska, all you want to do is get across, get to the other side and get to Colorado.
Done. Yeah,
so
done.
It ended up being kind of this ultra thing of riding, close to 200 miles a day. And so I learned that, hey, I kind of like being on my bike all day. And then I'd heard about that race across Missouri. And then from there, I just kept looking for, it was kind of popular for races to promote themselves as this is the hardest or the most difficult or the most challenging.
Right.
So I kind of sought those out and did that for a number of years.
Is there anything from your childhood, high school years, anything from before this time in Madison that would have physically prepared you for your friend to just ask you hey, let's go do 100 miles, or then a couple weeks later, let's go do however far it is from Wisconsin to Colorado? It's not short. But is there anything that you were athletically prepared to go do these things? Because that's a big thing to bite off for somebody that has thousands and thousands of miles. But it sounds like you're just jumping into this and I got a bike, let's go do it, and I'll just figure it out.
The ignorance of youth is a wonderful, wonderful thing. When you're 20, you can do anything. You don't need to train, you just go.
You're invincible, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in that, and as a corollary, if there wasn't something in that space and it's just purely John being like, I don't know, whatever, I can do this. I'm young. I'm strong. I can make it happen. Do you think there was anything that had prepared you for the mental challenge of being on a bike incessantly for that number of days?
It's all a process. I grew up really shy and quiet and introverted. So in some ways there's a strength to that. You tend to be, intrinsically motivated. And I think a definite key to success in long distance cycling is that internal motivation. Like you have to be able to generate interest on the inside, not life coming at you. So I think I was genetically predisposed to it, mentally in a lot of ways. And then, probably physiologically, not that I knew that at the time, but, I was always slow. So I think I was more slow twitch muscle fiber and was definitely geared towards endurance. I ran, track and cross country in high school and did better at the long distance events, but those are so short by comparison that
Sure.
they're sprints basically.
So
Yeah.
okay. So I feel like I'm gonna harp on this first century attempt. So in this first 100-mile ride with bike, I had a bike, but I wasn't really riding it. I'm sure that as things start to go sideways, as calves or quads or whatever cramp, and you don't, I assume, feed correctly, and all of the things that we've all gone through in trying to learn how we need to take care of ourselves when we're doing physical exertion for a long period of time. Like, as those things are going wrong, what are these some of the things that you just listed? Like some of the things that you were learning from that? Like what was kind of your process of absorbing some of those things, and what were you personally taking from that you kind of already described as a I don't want to say it's a failure, but it sounds like it didn't go well.
But that's the thing, is I didn't take it as it didn't go well. Like one person could have looked at that and never ridden a bike again. It was, so kind of terrible. But I didn't see it that way. I saw it as a success. I enjoyed it and had fun, even though I did cramp and fall apart, and I don't even know how I barely made it back, kind of deal. But for some reason, that did not get me down mentally. And I think that's, a kind of a key component to, if you look at the mental profile of people who do well and don't do well at ultra distance events, dealing with adversity is obviously a big part of it. It's good to make plans, but you have to adapt to changing conditions. And when things don't go well, you have to be okay with that and just readjust, instead of it being, okay, I'm going to ride perfectly for 100 or any distance miles. It's like, right now I'm just going to try and survive. And, surviving is going to be my new goal, and that's going to be great. And I'm going to be happy about that.
So that's a very interesting thing, because I think that shifting your mind from, everyone thinks they're, whomever famous cyclist, right? I'm going to be Greg LeMond. I'm going to be whoever, right? Everyone has like this idea of like who, but when you deal with the reality of being broken down, it gives you a chance to recenter yourself and think about things in a different way. Has that shift that you were able to like realize early on, has that colored the way that you've looked at and approached other things? Because your resume is absolutely
Strong.
Bananas things that, like, I don't know, I think I'm gonna ride the whole Iditarod. Like, that seems like a thing we should do. Maybe I should cycle across Australia. And like, those are things that like don't necessarily occur to people as a thing to potentially bite off. So do you think some of these learnings about those specific pieces adjusted how you approached things moving forward?
Maybe. I mean, to the last point, I think, something that's relevant and interesting And I knew this principle back then, but I didn't know the science behind it. But it's called dopamine reward prediction error. And if you have a set expectation for a event happening, and then that event doesn't meet your goals, you don't meet your goals, your actual secretion of dopamine will be less than if you did. So, and dopamine has a tangible performance benefit. They've tested animals to the point of exhaustion, to where like a muscle will not fire, and then given it dopamine, and the muscle will start to fire again. It'll start the neurotransmitters going. So that is really important. And of course you can get dopamine from thoughts. Like if you hear your favorite song comes on the radio and you get that rush, that's a dopamine rush. So you can get this kind of psychophysical energy with your attitude. And so I think attitude really makes a monumental difference in how you perceive exertion and or discomfort. So I think that's where that's where that starts. In terms of why did I look at having higher goals? I don't know. Like I first went to Alaska to do this race on the Iditarod Trail, and I didn't know you could ride a bike on snow, but people in Alaska did it, so I figured it must be possible.
Right, yeah.
So I thought I would give it a try. Like if somebody can do it, then I can at least give it a try. So I've never been like overly confident in, like, it's not like, oh, I'm going to conquer the world, or I'm going to go do this race and do that. Like that was never my attitude. It was more, well, if it seems like it can be done, or kind of why can't it, or let's give it a try, was more my attitude.
Okay, so, and I think this is where I think we can cite some of the Wikipedia stuff, because I think it's going to feed a little bit of my question. Is 1992 first crossing of the Australian continent by bicycle, and then obviously the I did a sport race, the 170 mile, the I did a sport 350 mile, and then getting into the 24-hour racing. And it seems like for you there was, just like almost similarly to doing the century and then riding from Wisconsin to Colorado, like there was this ever-growing escalation of the challenge, and how like you're saying, like, oh well, other people are doing it, so I want to go do it, or I think I can do it. Was like that escalation for you, looking back on it now? Do you think that was the natural stair stepping of upping the challenge and trying to push yourself further, or were you trying to kind of figure out what your own capacity was? Like, where did that mentality come? Because I think a lot of what you were just saying, as nerdy as that was, and as much as I love talking about nerdy stuff, I feel like that's coming from 2021 experience, looking back on all of those experiences and all of the things that you've learned. But I think it's kind of important to stay relative to the experience level and kind of your understanding for a lot of these things. So Can you kind of put yourself back in the like late 80s, early 90s position where you were, and talk us through like when you discovered, because we're talking like there's no internet, there's nothing about that stuff, and you're finding things that are all over the globe. And so talk us through when you discovered these events and what your thought was, and then the transition in your own brain of like, oh my God, that sounds amazing, I should go do it.
Yeah, it was more, because this was kind of a new frontier of endurance sports. Nobody knew what human endurance limits were. And so I don't think, anybody had the wherewithal to know where the sport would go. It was a quest to find out, well, what are the limits of human endurance? Like, how far can you go until you
fall down, go boom.
And what is that? So by limit, so, okay, what's your limit? You can do X, and then what happens? Like, what happens when you're at your limit? Like, what does that even mean? And, can't you go just a little bit harder each time? Each time you've proven that you can do something, well, the next guy comes along or gal comes along and say, well, that person did that. I can do it one better, in some way better. So it's just, you just keep escalating what you think is possible. Like I remember when I first did the Great Divide, which was 2,500 miles, with 200,000 feet of climbing. I didn't know how much you could do that, how little sleep you could do that on. Like I didn't know because I didn't have any metric. It's like,
nobody was doing it.
No one did.
Right.
The guys who did Race Across America, who had a a Winnebago following them, so like they had kind of a safety thing. They could do an hour and a half a night of sleep, roughly for 7 to 9 days. But this is almost double that. And then so like it was unknown territory. So you have to try it once to find out. And then people keep getting better.
So that's an interesting thing you said twice now that I want to ask about. You said then people keep getting better, right? You go out and you try a thing that nobody's really tried to do, right? How far can I push myself on the Great Divide? What did it feel like 5 years after you had done this thing that was this crazy thing that nobody had been able to best? What was the moment like when that record was broken? What was that for you, either emotionally or in your scientific part of your brain? Like how was the reaction in that space?
Oh, I loved it. I helped those guys right from the very first next year. I was helping like Mike Kiriak. I can't remember who broke it first. If it was Mike Kiriak. But I worked with those guys and I helped them, and I said I thought they could do it in a couple days faster, and like the technology started to change. So I really wanted to be, to help the sport grow. And I was excited about the whole, the process of it. So like, yes, I absolutely wanted the first time that somebody tried to break my record, I wanted them to fail. Absolutely. I wanted that. I wanted to have that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right. But then after that, I was like, okay, now, let's you guys go out and break my record. And, here's a good way to do it.
Well, that like everything that you're saying leads to kind of an interesting idea in that I'm getting the impression that yes, there is a competition portion of it, but it's not necessarily against the other folks in that specific event. That it is, you have kind of wrapped your head around, I am competing against myself and what I am capable of doing and seeing if I can go +1, as you just said, on what I've done previously. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's both. Like, I think everybody's competitive. I'm as competitive with other folks. But you have to be very competitive and self-critical as well. Like, I'd rather do my absolute best regardless of where I, finish in a race, rather than, do subpar and, say win. I would leave that feeling, kind of poor. Like sure. I didn't do what I could have, should have. And I mean, sometimes, like we can't, sure. You're not always on your A game, but yeah, it's about like excelling at your best and exploring your limits, for me anyway.
And that's been part of this, like, I think this narrative that you've kind of built. Like, you did things that people were not allowed to do, which I really absolutely enjoy. Like, you signed up for a race. This is still and Ian told us a story and it makes me laugh so hard, but you signed up for a race as 4 versions of yourself so that you could do a 24-hour race solo, which is so genius. I want to know what the actual other names are. Do you remember them and how did you spell them?
It was like John Stamstad, John Robert Stamstad, J.R. Stamstad, and maybe J. Robert or Bobby or some version of that. I don't remember what the last one was.
So what, like when you show up to the event and the event organizers, like you see you're setting up your pit area, whatever you have going on, and your table of Pop-Tarts and Mountain Dew and whatever you need to keep you going.
Yeah, whatever donuts you normally fuel yourself.
I'm just listing off stuff that I would want to have in that moment. It's give me as much like sugar inducing stuff as possible, but like what was their reaction when they found out that it was like, yes, you check the boxes, you put 4 different names down for the 4-person relay, and then they see you starting and you relay to yourself? Like what was it a, like, were they angry with you, or was it more of like a, let's see, is he gonna die? Like what were they just completely baffled by why somebody would try that?
Well, that was kind of a 3-year process. So that was Laird Knight was the race promoter, who, super good guy, get along really well with him. And I didn't blindside him with the, just showing up. Like, it's kind of interesting how it came to be. So he said, like, he started the 24-hour relay craze, 24 hours a Canaan. He was, like the first promoter who did that. And I had heard about it, and I raced it as a team. I think the second year it was in existence, 1993. So I went there with Team Bridgestone, and we did it as a team. And I thought, wow, this would be really fun, although really hard to do solo. And I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure I mentioned it to him. And he's like, no, this is a team event. I don't do the solo thing. And then, so I went again the next year, raced it as a pro team, and I kind of pushed, a lot harder. And I was like, this solo thing is kind of taken off. And he had hesitations on it because he saw solo endurance racing as the Julie Moss finishing the Ironman, like crawling and wetting herself and just completely falling apart.
Yeah. And
what I had to explain to him was, that's not normal. That's like when everything goes completely haywire and wrong. That doesn't happen to the average person. You look at Mark Allen finishing the Ironman back in that day, and the dude looks like he just got out of the shower, like he's cold as a cucumber. And, people finishing a 24-hour race can look the same. You can push yourself to the limit and not be staggering and falling.
I mean, you can. To be clear, you can. I would not.
But yes, plenty of people can, though.
Right, yes.
But so it took me a long time to kind of sell him on that. And then whichever year that was, I kind of finally just said, and to myself, like, well, I'm just going to pay 4 pro entry fees, and I'm going to dare him to say no. Like, he's not going to turn down 4 entry fees and and like say no to my face. So it kind of was a duel, and we both, kind of made it work, and it worked for everybody. So I showed up, did the race as a team, and we all had fun. And then the next year he created a solo class. So it worked out perfectly for, I think for everyone.
So I want to talk a little bit about during this time of you racing with these pro teams and taking on these really, really big meaty events, and talk about what, I think now we're getting into a world of having a little bit more access to data and being able to see maybe a little bit more of what pro riders are doing. I still think that, like, the ones that are using Strava aren't putting all of their data up there just to keep a little bit of anonymity, so you can only see part of what they're doing. But back then, it was, you just saw, like Doug, you were talking in the intro of, I want to be like Greg LeMond, but you never saw what his schedule to get to be like Greg LeMond was like. So at this time, when we're mid 90s and mountain biking across the states is like blowing up, and it's huge, and you're doing a lot of mountain bike races, and you're doing a lot of really, really endurance intense events. So what was a regular week or a regular month like for you in training and diet and like personal life? Like what did the life of John look like at this point in terms of like being a kind of well-rounded human?
Yeah, maybe not well-rounded. Because I don't think it's compatible. Like I
Well,
don't think it's compatible with.
I think that's part of the
you,
question, right?
You kind of short-circuited my question because that's kind of where I was assuming that it was going to lead, and you just answered it. So
yeah, if you're not
thanks.
obsessive compulsive, like I don't think you're not going to do very well. It's just not a perfectly emotionally healthy sport. Just the amount of time, the training that is involved, it's a pretty narrow focus. So, but my training wasn't any different than any other top rider. I would ride between 20 and 30 hours a week. I would do long rides. I would do intervals. I mean, I would do things differently now based on what I know from power meter data than I did then. We were training by heart rate, which is kind of silly. There was just a lot of mistakes made, but at the time, like most everyone was making those mistakes because we had the best information we could get. And I was working with Bill Vaughn, the creator of Power Bar and Goo. So I had the best nutritional science, and the nutritional aspect is a fun part of this too, because nobody knew what nutritionally, like how should you eat for a 24-hour or multi-day event? There was science. There was zero science on it.
Yeah, I'm lucky if I can figure out how to have 3 squares, right? Like much less try to fuel myself on a bike for 8 hours, 24 hours. Like the science wasn't there at that time. You guys were poking around in the dark.
Totally. So that was, learn by making mistakes, try and compensate. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
So talk a little bit about the science of figuring out, like in those dark days of like the beginning of Power Bar and Goo, like, do you remember any specific, like, hey, I've got this great idea. I think if I just eat bananas for this whole race, I'm gonna be okay. Like, do you remember a moment where you had like a really good idea that maybe went haywire, horribly wrong? Like, how did, like, from those perspectives of finding things,
Well, I knew that it at least seemed like the carbohydrate diet, which we had been pitched as athletes for forever. Like, if you're an athlete, you have to eat carbohydrates, and that's it. And anything else is a waste. Protein's a waste, and fat is, too slow, and etc. And as it turned out, there was research that came out, I'm not sure what year, but you can only process so many calories of carbohydrates per hour, and it's roughly 300-ish depending on the person. And in a 24-hour race and others, you need more than that. So if you're taking in only carbohydrate calories, that's where all these people were having stomach troubles, is they're taking in calories that they can't process. So it was much better to have while people were making fun of me for eating high-fat foods, there was some madness, science behind that madness. Like you have to, because you can't get the calories from carbohydrates. You can't get enough.
So, okay. So, and you've already kind of made mention of this is doing the divide and not understanding like what is the minimum amount of sleep that I can go on and like finding some of those limits. And now we're talking about it with food and talking about high fat items. So like give us some kind of what were you working with at the time in terms of like carb sources and fat sources?
Well, the divide is another different animal because doing that self-supported, you are dependent on gas station food.
Delicious.
So you're at mercy. And
speaking of stomach problems.
Yeah. And what I found was, especially, and the Great Divide has totally changed in the last 20 years in that respect, because now now it's a cottage industry of people, coming down that route. So stores are totally stocked with, lots of options. But in 1999, it was more old school gas stations. And I remember the gas stations in Colorado were dreamy. They had everything, because kind of the Colorado athlete mentality, but Wyoming, New Mexico were one bad place. I remember eating the last taste of Spam that I've ever had because I had to choke it down because I had I had no other food. Like I had no choice. And that's all I could get at this one gas station. And yeah, I can't. 20 years ago, and I'll never consider Spam under any circumstances.
No one mailed John packages of Spam. That's real mean. Don't do that. He'll throw them back at your house. But I think it's interesting because you have to figure out all of that stuff. And there isn't, Alan Lim being like, here's a cookbook on what you should make and pack for a ride. And there's none of that. And you have to learn your own body. And I think there's some of that for all of us, right? Like we figure out what works for us for nutrition that we like, but the options are there. There's all of these things that have come along. And I find it like interesting to think about how much of your time doing this, 35 plus years has been experimentation with what is possible, right? Like it's about exploring this space. You obviously somehow figured out a bit of a balance. You have a family, like you have other things going on. What did it look like when those pieces started coming together into John's life and competition changed for you? Like, what was that era of your time like?
How do you mean?
So like, I like you have a family, and that is a thing that I think a lot of people would struggle balancing. Well, how do you approach that?
And we just talked about it too, is you said that the lifestyle does not lend itself to being really balanced, and having a partner, having a child, all of those things are things that start to take you in other directions. And I mean, you can pick just about any pro cyclist and see how they've handled being a parent, and see that for some it has completely changed the direction of their professional career. So I think it's always interesting to hear for somebody that was as kind of myopic in a sport as you were and dedicated to being and living that lifestyle, to have those external influences come in to see how you balance all of those pieces.
Well, I loved it. It was really important for me to have a family. I mean, I ever since I was young, like, I don't have many peers who have kids. Like it doesn't.
Oh, for sure.
In the athlete world, it's somewhat uncommon. The other side of that, I am twice divorced. So
hey, I am too. So it's all right.
I can't say that I've been super successful with it, but it's been tremendous. And my kids have given me, like even early on, gave me better perspective at racing and kind of everything. Like as any parent knows, you learn as much from them as they get from you. But yeah, trying to put it all together, I think is hard. What are the 4 things? There's career, significant other, kids, and a passion. You can do 3 out of those 4, but you can't do all 4. That's kind of the way life works.
So you mentioned that it was an important piece for you of having a family, having a partner. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I mean, not that we necessarily need to go into the marriage counseling of like
why they're show. I have a lot of experience, but that's not
right. That's
podcast.
The 513-455-77. You can call and leave us a voicemail and talk, and you can just talk into a speaker, and we'll listen to it later. But like in terms of what you needed out of those partnerships, and then potentially where where they went awry, because it is I think all of us deal with it, whether we're whether you're trying to do something like a 24-hour race, or ride the divide for 3 weeks straight, or whatever those things are that are big things. We all have those big rocks, and we all have those times where those challenges and those important things in our lives are always kind of rubbing each other. So I'm wondering, like, what are the things that you've learned from those? God, I don't ever want to call something a failure, but from those experiences that you've kind of carried with you into today.
It's hard to say. Like, if you make enough money, that can solve a heck of a lot of problems. And in the sport of ultra endurance racing, has never been a whole lot of excess money, and so that doesn't kind of solve or cover some of those.
I would say that
problems.
Exacerbates probably some problems in general.
Always.
Yeah.
I like how flatly you said that. You're just like, always.
Yeah.
Trust. I'm with you, John. Like that is a challenge, right? But like our financial health and the ability to do those sort of things allow people to pursue passions to some extent. So I hear that 100%. Is there, like, are there lessons from that space that you bring forth that are not necessarily interpersonal, but that have allowed you to like reflect on the things that you've like brought forth from all the challenges of doing these crazy long hard things from the other perspective? You've done all this stuff and you've brought it back onto being a father, being in relationships. Talk a little bit about those things that you learned in that space and how you've applied them into those functional spaces.
I'm not sure that they do. Like, my kids all have their own identities. My youngest seems, kind of athletically, focused and driven, and he's kind of has that, drive and passion. My other two kids, aren't, have their other interests. So I don't know that, it's, not like I could say, oh, what I've learned, from an athlete has really translated, into, parenting my kids. I'm not sure that there has been a direct.
But maybe not from that perspective of athletics, but from, you've spent the dumbest possible amount of time of any human on a bike introspecting yourself, right? Looking deep and dark into John and thinking about what it is to be a person and be in that space. Have there been lessons that you feel like you're able to impart because you've been to those, like, very dark places of analyzing yourself and keeping your attitude correct? Like, has there been anything from that perspective that you've been able to share? And I have no idea how old your kids are, so maybe they aren't ready for that heavy stuff yet.
Yeah, I would just say they're not old enough for that. Like, I think that's more of an adult concept. My 14-year-old, wants to, go shoot hoops as often as he can. I've been trying to get him to read Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee has some very interesting, philosophical lines about kind of the blending of being an athlete and good human that are interesting, that I'm trying to gently nudge him towards reading and coming, so that it's his idea kind of thing,
Yeah. Don't ever. Yeah.
Don't let him watch this. And so he doesn't know that you're
exactly.
Jedi mind tricking him into reading Bruce Lee.
No one wants their, if your parents think it's cool, you probably don't want to do it. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
that's part of the challenge of that thing. Right. Like, I don't know. Do any of them, like, are they like bike engaged? I'm curious about that. I always like people in the space where they are parents of kids that are in their, early teens and younger years. Are your kids bike engaged, and have they approached it from their own perspective?
Well, that's what's interesting. My 14-year-old, again, like, like he's biked and not biked, over the years. But then last year, because of the pandemic, all of the other, then 13-year-olds all discovered mountain biking. So all of a sudden it became a cool sport. And so he started doing it. So, I mean, he's away at camp right now, but when he gets back, I'm hoping we can spend the rest of the summer, mountain biking. But that was more, and at that age, it is what it is. It's peer driven.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's definitely not because you think it's cool. It's 100% because he. Yeah. So, but Doug, you brought up an interesting point about. I think in cycling we've made mention of it before, that there's this romanticizing of going to the dark place and going to those, call it whatever you want, and again, romanticize it however you please. But so for you, there's got to be things that you've learned about yourself, or and Doug, you kind of mentioned it too, like the introspection of spending that much time on the bike, because there's a point where long rides become meditative. And I got to believe if you're going across Iowa or you're going across Wyoming or places like that are a lot of the same things. I know driving across Iowa becomes meditative to me. And that's at 70 miles an hour. So I'm wondering, what are the things, I guess first part of the question is, what are the things that you focus on during those points of what are the lighthouses for you, whether it's getting to the next checkpoint, or is it heart rate, or is it watts? Like what are the things in your head that you're, because I think we all do this. I have like a cadence that I try and follow when I run, because I still struggle with enjoying running. And if I can put some sort of mental structure around it, it makes it easier for me to get into longer runs. And I got to believe that there's a point where, okay, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. So I'm curious, for any time that we have somebody that is an ultra endurance athlete, we kind of always ask him the question of, like, what do you fixate on during those long rides, whether they're training rides or the actual event rides?
Well, I think just some of the, tangible things, the metrics you have to think about, your logistics, how many miles, to the next place that you're going to fuel. I think it's, in terms of like occupying your mind, I've found doing math problems is a really efficient way to almost self-hypnotize.
Huh.
Because, once you reach a certain fatigue state, it's harder to do, even simple math problems.
Right.
And, it's fun to do like, let's say you're in first place and, second place is behind you, and you're going back to the grade school, story problem of if cyclist A is going 8 miles an hour and is 2 miles ahead, and if cyclist B is going 8.1 miles per hour, but he's, X, behind, when will the two catch up to each other? So you can spend an awful lot of time crunching that and trying to figure out where you are in the race.
I used to do that on drives, like when I was doing long drives, like in the tractor trailer. Think about if I increase this by 1 mile per hour, how much quicker? Because I'm horrible at math, so it takes a lot of my mental capacity. So it's good that I'm just like, it's gonna be hard for me to think about. I really got to do the abacus here.
Right.
It's funny you say that, because I actually hung out with one of our cycling friends today, and he's more of a time trialist, and that's exactly what he does. Is he tries to, as he gets kind of deeper into a place, to make the math harder, because it basically brings him back down to that kind of just above threshold. Because if he can't do the math, then he knows he has to back off. So it's like his kind of like gating mechanism for those really, really intense hour-long efforts, to kind of keep him like right at the like fourth grade level math, maybe, of like long division, but not really like 8 to 8.1 miles an hour is like, you got a lot of time to think about that.
But in the bigger picture, I think the sport is kind of a therapy session. And, from what I found in my experience is you tend to bat things around, it's kind of free association, and you work through problems, without, really concentrating on them, just going over, traveling a distance and traveling through, having an experience, of a long distance race. And you always get to, almost always get to a point where, you're really, really mentally challenged. And it's, when you get to those points, at your weakest points, you also become really honest with yourself. And so anything that you have, that you're kind of holding, down, from your conscience, tends to rise to the surface. So I do think, like emotionally honest, direct people do tend to do better because they don't run into as many difficulties. They don't make like, I see a lot of people who make poor decisions because they're kind of jumbled once they get sleep deprived and they've got too much going on in their head. Whereas, the ability to make decisions at your weakest moments, you really have to have your subconscious brain tightly wired
and quiet.
Yes.
I'm discovering, so like, and not that it's at all a surprise for anyone. So maybe anyone listening to this is like, well, duh, John, like, of course but there's so many similarities between this and just navigating regular life for what it throws at you in times of stress and challenge and personal turmoil or things like that, is having, under those situations of duress, being able to have a quiet mind and to be able to think clearly about what needs to be done next. And it's interesting that you kind of transition naturally into that, because that was going to be part 2 of my question is, okay, those are the things that you keep yourself occupied with during, but I'm wondering, in this, 3.5 decades of pushing yourself, I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've learned about yourself. And you're kind of already touching on some of them in terms of making sure that you have a lot of the additional baggage that can come with just being a human, at least acknowledged before you set off for, 20 days or 18 days or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, like,
or do those things come up during events and you're like, I got to deal with that?
Well, for instance, this past week I did the ride around the Olympic Peninsula.
Yeah,
and
by the way, folks, he just did a ride around the entire Olympic Peninsula, 400 miles ish. 440. Sorry, didn't want to short you the miles there. 440 and like 40K worth of vert, right? Like just a minor thing.
No big deal. Yeah.
Minor situation.
But so I did it. My plan was to do it without sleep, or at least with as little sleep as possible. And so I did the first 56 hours straight before I ran into some issues. But that second night was really fascinating for me, because, it's the second night where the sleep deprivation, starts to add up. And that's where, if there's any chinks in your armor, like they just come right through. And I got into a zone, I think it's Michael Pollan wrote a book on how to change your mind. With psilocybins, and how the neuroplasticity can affect how your brain like physically sees things.
Yeah.
And I started to feel the same thing with sleep deprivation. Like, when I was looking at things, I wasn't seeing the positive patterns, I was seeing the negative space patterns. Like just my view of the world, I was seeing the negative space, which I found incredibly fascinating. But then I also started to notice that, what was I having? I think I was having pain with something, like my Achilles was hurting or something. And I would take, at that deprived, state, I would take a feeling of pain and I would turn that into a personality. So that almost became a person in my head. And then, so after you do this for a while, and you kind of you're fading, back and forth in and out of this frame of mind, and you start to think, wait, which one is real here and which one isn't, and you lose a firm grasp on reality for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need to tighten that back up and get control over it. So having the confidence that you can do that, one, is very empowering. And I was able to do that. So for me, it was a good experience.
I think this is something
that probably sounded a little convoluted, but
no. I understand exactly where you're at. And I mean, and thank you for bringing up Michael Pollan and his psilocybin research, because I think it really is that research, because there is a lot about neuroplasticity and the way our brains are able to process stuff. And you are taking the human body to a space that it is uncomfortable at, right? It is a place that it is not that it's not made for it, because I don't think that's a correct statement, but I think
it's probably to a point where it's sending warning signals to your frontal lobe of like, you have to change something about this, because there are warning bells all over the place that are not normal.
But I think there are a lot of things, and specifically when it comes to psychedelics and those sort of things, where it does blur the perception of certain things, that allows you to understand how to bring yourself back into a space of control. And it is interesting.
That's my point. And I don't think it's warning bells. I think it's it's simply a different kind of view of reality, and then you can kind of shift between the two. And I wouldn't even say, I don't know if one is necessarily better than the other. They're two different ways to see the world.
Sure.
And I viewed it more like that. It was a different view of things.
So okay, so that leads me to this: is in those situations, I think that's where most people. Again, obviously we've well established that you are probably on one far end of the bell curve in terms of things that you're capable of tolerating for long periods of time.
Yeah, physiologically, at like bare minimum.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was coming at with the idea of warning bells. I think that when those things start to happen, that this is the thing that I know. And the psilocybin reference is a like perfect comparison for this, because it is the experience that you have on those is taking you to a completely different place. And there's only two ways that you can react to that: is you either embrace it or you freak out.
Right.
And so what do you think?
Don't do the latter. Let me just tell you, don't do the latter. It's very bad.
So I guess it leads me to what do you think about you makes you comfortable in those situations to acknowledge what that is? Because I think your level of understanding of the human physiology is probably PhD level at this point, whether you have any of the training to back it up or not. I think just the raw time that you invested in having the 10,000 hours of doing it is probably on par with any sports physiologist or probably any coach on the planet.
Yeah.
But what do you think specifically is unique to you that makes you comfortable in those situations to say, okay, I know what's going on here, and it's okay?
The younger me would have said, free will, and it's my choice. The 56-year-old me says it's a deterministic world just based on my how my neurons are arranged and my experience in the world. And that's just happens to be like, I would like to say that I'm curious about those things and the world. And so I get pleasure from exploring them. Like, it makes me happy to explore those limits. I guess you could say it gives me dopamine. So I have a good dopamine reward, cycle, so that when I do those, I get dopamine, and so I do it more. But
Sure.
I just truly, I love that exploration. It just fascinates me to get places that, others can't go, or that, maybe we don't even want to go very often, but it's super cool to visit that place every now and then.
I love that. I love that because yeah, you're the rat getting the pellet for sure, right? Like we're all the rat getting the pellet, and we're in our own ways, right?
He's getting a different pellet though.
Right. And that's cool. And that's probably a fun pellet. And I'm down for it.
As long as it works.
Right. Yeah. As long as it does work. But here you are, you've been getting this pellet that's fed John for these number of years, 35 plus years of doing ultra endurance stuff and just gathering this stuff. Do you still find that when you go out and decide to circumnavigate the Olympia mountain range, do you still find that you're getting another pellet? Like, do you still find new things that you're learning about yourself?
Well, that's the problem, of course, is the diminishing returns. Like, how far can you keep pushing things? Like, realistically, it's not practical. But so I took a bunch of years off, and so now I'm getting back into it. So it is kind of new to me. And so that's why this ride was kind of important to me, and why I got a ton out of it. And, that's why I did it. As far as, looking forward and doing more events in the future, like, you can't keep pushing the limit of, like, well, all right, I can do 3 nights without sleep. Can I do 4? Like,
right. Yeah.
That's, I don't need to do that.
That's for 20-year-old John, right? That's like,
yes,
20-year-old John. Yeah.
But to just go up and, maybe touch that, every couple of years or so is fun and interesting. And then I can occupy myself with other things in the, in between.
Okay. So now that we're talking about kind of looking forward, and you mentioned that, and I love how your brain works. I feel like a lot of what you're saying is how I approach things. It's very tactical. It's very analytical. And you're looking at things very, very much for just on the surface of what they are, even though we're talking about very kind of oblique subjects that maybe don't have a lot of chemistry or a lot of true science behind them. But so you're talking about, okay, now I want to be able to go and touch it every now and then, but I can't keep going to that well to go get the pellet that often, because it's going to devalue it over time. So every time I want to go get that pellet, it has to be a special occasion. So for you, it seemed pretty clear that you still got to go get those dopamine hits. So in between these bigger tasks, what do you see yourself filling that space with that's still going to go trigger that kind of Lockean satisfaction of getting that dopamine pellet?
Oh, I think you can get that without doing extreme stuff. Like here in the Northwest, just going for, a spectacular day ride in the Cascades is worth everything. Just seeing the mountains and smelling, the smells up high, and just, getting the grasp of the awesomeness when you're at the top of the Cascades and you're just seeing peaks, as far as you can see up into British, Columbia. That does it for me. Those things work. Or like last summer, I did a ride not far from here in Seattle, and I saw a family of wolves. I'd never seen adult and little wolves, together. That was incredibly cool for me. So there's lots of different ways.
I think that understanding that you don't have to go get that pellet every time is good, right? Knowing that there are times to do that and finding appreciation in a different space is part of what we're all like chasing after to some extent. Like those exceptional moments are okay to be the exceptional moments.
Totally.
So I guess one last piece from me on that is, do you feel like you are now comfortable with chasing those big pieces occasionally because of this whole body of work that you've put together? Like if you had spent the last 3.5 decades occasionally going and kind of touching the brass ring, as it were, of this kind of existential experience we're talking about, do you still feel like you would be okay only doing it occasionally? Or is this something that you feel like you've acquired this broader understanding after delving so deeply into it for so long?
I don't think I understand. Do you mean because of, like past success, I don't feel as driven or
not? No, I don't get the sense that it's like
saying.
a driven piece. Yeah, go ahead and see if you can.
I think John's not saying necessarily it's about achievement, but because you've done all these things and you've been to those places that you're like, oh, I can come back here and visit. Is there a comfortability in the ability to not have to go there every single day or every single event and just come back and visit it occasionally? Am I parsing you correctly, John?
Yeah, because I think it's if you've done something so many times and you've been to those places in so many different venues and so many different countries across the world, I feel like you've probably developed a really good language for those spaces and have a really good understanding of them, but also understand that you don't need to go to them all the time. And that's kind of where, I think that's where I was going, is like, you discover a new restaurant, and when you first discover it, you want to go there all the time. But then after you get to a point, you're like, no, I'm losing the special feeling that this place gave me. Now I need to back off and only go there, once every couple months.
Well, it's fascinating, and part of that is where the sport has gone. So when I was doing this 20, 30 years ago, I did almost all of the events that there were. Now, there are so many more cool events that the options are almost unlimited. And so it opens up opportunities to do more things.
Right.
So I think it's, in some ways, it's there's so many more things that I potentially would want to do just because they're there.
Right.
Like, my friend Jay Peterberry is going over and doing the Silk Road race. Well, that would be cool. I'd love to do that.
That would be amazing.
And then there's that one in Morocco, or, the Trans-Pyrenees. It's like, well, Pyrenees are cool.
Yeah.
Like,
so I think that's the question now. So like, is that what's next? Like just starting to figure out like the places that you haven't had the opportunity to travel and explore? Is that what's next for you?
Yeah. And I would say more explore. Like, I'm old. I don't have delusions of grandeur in terms of like doing as well as I, did in the past. But I would like to do well enough to, finish and, be solid and explore like these cool routes that are all over the world now. Like that seems really fun to me.
I love that there's this wanderlust still in you and this desire to explore you, even though you've touched it so many times in a way that a lot of people don't necessarily get the chance to. And that you're still like game for it because you're like, no, there's more I can experience in this world. I think that's a really like a brilliant way to live and see the inside of yourself and the outside of the world.
Yeah. It's about trying to, be mature, but and learn, from the wisdom of your years, but still go back to being a kid.
I think, yeah, even
having
like,
that zest of-
yeah, and that kind of takes me to like building on what Doug said and going back to something that you said probably 15 minutes ago, John, is having the joy to discover those things and welcome those experiences with kind of open arms. That to me is the big takeaway from that constant, not necessarily wanderlust. Like I feel like that word gets kind of a bad rap with people.
Kind of overused word.
But it is that, like, I don't ever want my sponge to be filled, and I want to like continue to soak up as much of this experience as possible, because that's what it's all for. And that, like, that's the piece that I take away from you. And that's like when you talk about all of these experiences and you talk about the accomplishments, yeah, you talk about them analytically, but I feel like you're talking about them through that lens of, man, that was such a great experience. And it is like a 1 in a million experience. That's not, going and sitting down and having a nice steak. It is that 1 in a million thing that you can only do by going to a very, very unique place and doing a very, very unique thing. That is, I think back to the movie Garden State. There was something that happened in my life a couple days ago that reminded me of this. The scene where, I forget the female lead character's name, but she was talking about trying to do something, like standing in a place in the street and doing some weird dance and doing something that no one has ever done in that position on the earth ever before, and trying to do something truly unique, because that's her way of experiencing something new that no one else has ever experienced before.
Right.
And some of the stuff that you're like, the things that we're talking about, like going up and kind of touching the limits of, is you're in pretty rare air in terms of the number of humans that have gone and experienced that depth of endurance sport or brain activity. I don't want to call it hallucinations, but those unique experiences that your body's going through during those kind of efforts. There's not a lot of people that actively choose to put themselves through those situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't call it I don't hallucinate. I'm trying to think if I ever have, and I don't do caffeine. Like, haven't felt the need, and I think that just messes up your mind a little bit more than is necessary in those situations.
Oh, in those situations, for sure. Yeah. I mean,
I have coffee every day. Don't get me wrong.
I was just about to be like, all right, so now's the time when we kick John off the podcast because he has decided to badmouth coffee.
Yeah. No, I was sitting here thinking like, oh, I gotta give up coffee because now I want to live more like John and have these experiences. But no, I feel way better now.
Right. Cool. Yeah. You for a moment you were about to be persona non grata on the Gravel Lot. We are sponsored by coffee. My mug says, "But first coffee." Like, this is legitimately how we have to live life. Like, I am so thankful that we've got a chance to kind of like explore your history with things, and like the person that is kind of behind some of the legendary things you've done. And I think it's exciting that you have all these other things that you plan on conquering for yourself, right? It is not about the history books. It is not about that stuff. It is about the personal journey. And I love that that's how you approach it, because I think that's what we're all on. And I'm excited to like follow you into the future, whatever that is that you choose for yourself, because I know whatever you do, you will do it like fully and full-throatedly. Like, that is the person that you are. And I really enjoy the time we've been able to spend tonight. So
I really appreciate it too. Yeah, my goal is to have fun and do it with integrity.
That's
there's just
gold, but good one.
There's just so much purity in listening to you talk about all of these experiences, and I mean, we could probably do a whole nother podcast about trying to pick your brain on the science and diet, and people could submit questions, and we could probably just do this like 3-hour Q&A with you to pick your brain and learn about how you approach events and using some of your experience. But that's for another time. If you guys want that, like, leave a comment, and we will try and make something like that happen. But Doug, I know you have one question, and then we're gonna do some ad reads, and then we're gonna wrap up with our final question. So we're gonna have, I guess, Doug.
Yeah. So here's the thing. In doing our research, I came across a photo, and I would like first to ask a qualifying question. Number one, do you follow like death metal from the 80s and 90s at all?
No.
Okay. That makes this harder to ask. But do you know that the photo of you with the bicycle wheel that is on the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame, you look like a dead doppelganger for Dave Mustaine of Megadeth.
Huh.
It is beautiful. Your hair is perfect, and like you got the jeans on. I was like, is that Dave Mustaine or is that John Stamstad?
That is interesting. I have not had anyone make that reference before. That's good.
It was perfect.
Doug sent me, when we were going through things this morning, I was traveling back home this morning, and Doug sent that to me, and I literally replied, "Why are you sending me pictures of Dave Mustaine?"
It is like very much him, like right when the band, like right after he left Metallica, right when the band got started. I'm like an old metalhead in a lot of ways. I just thought it was great, and I just loved it because that was definitely the vibe at that time, right? Like that was totally. Like the look. So I was just like, yeah, Dave Mustaine. I backed it. So I was like, I'm going to
channeling him.
That's fine. So we will ask our last question after we do the ad reads. We're going to ask you, and we're going to want to know what you want the Pebbles to take home from our conversation. So you ruminate on that while we pay some quick bills, and then we'll all head on out from here. So as we wrap it up today, thanks to all of our folks for being here, listening. Pebbles, you're amazing. We love you. Thanks for being here and engaging and making TGL so successful. We're really appreciative of all your support wherever it is. We could just not make this happen if it wasn't for people actually listening to the thing. So in addition to you supporting the show, we really encourage you to slide on over to all the folks who sponsor the show because they assist us in bringing this to you. We would like you to show them some love so that they can keep supporting the show and keep on making this thing happen.
If you guys are looking for kit, whether it's for your team or for yourself, head over to Be Free Ride Bike Cycling Apparel. You guys should know by now we've been working with Adam and all the folks over at BFRB for a couple years now, developing some of our own kits, working with them on developing kind of some of their regular retail kits as well. But it is fully customized kit, personally tailored to your needs. Head over to bfrbcycling.com. Reach out and contact them today and talk through not only designing your own kit, but picking the fabrics, picking the cut. I mean, you can decide if you want a collar or not a collar, if you want extra long torsos, regular, like you can literally design the entire kit. It's not just slapping graphics on, a pre-made jersey. So get a hold of them, bfrbcycling.com, and take a look at how they can help you and your entire team get outfitted for the rest of 2021 cyclocross season or ultra endurance events that are left, or 2022, or just head over to their website and see what they have for sale and maybe pick up a jersey or a pair of bibs.
Absolutely. Make sure you follow the link in our show notes and head on over to thegrimporbrothers.com right now. And today dropping, if you are listening to this live here on Monday night, because we're kind of out of sequence because of a bunch of life things, the new Jake Wells Champ coffee. So our good buddy Jake is doing a coffee to benefit a local Colorado cycling group that's doing positive things in the community. But guess what? That's what all of Grimport Cycling's coffee blends do. They put money back into the cycling community and benefit really great stuff. Our friend Jessica, all sorts of great teams, all sorts of great people who are doing important things. So get on over to Grimport Brothers and get some coffee that supports good causes in cycling. And don't forget that if you sign up for subscription service, you get an extra bag of coffee right meow. So go to grimportbrothers.com and get that sorted out.
And we are also being supported this week by Mitch and everybody over at BioWheels Fit Studio and Workshop, located actually right up the road from where Doug and I are at right now in Madeira. Technically, we call it Cincinnati, but For anyone in the area, it's Madeira. Mitch is offering you a full host of bike fitting services. So everything that you could need, from movement assessments to motion capture to the actual fit to making inserts for your shoes, making, get special saddles, all of the pieces to make sure that you are on the most efficient, comfortable, and sustainable bike fit that you have ever had. And oh yes, Mitch actually has bicycles for sale. You can go to biowheels.com and actually see what is currently in stock, and also what is currently in, I think, shipping, and what time that they're supposed to arrive in stock. So you can see what the bike is, what the size is, and what the actual group set and wheel set and all those things are. But I think the bigger thing, and if there was a way to put in all caps on a podcast, it is that there are bikes in stock. Bikes in stock.
Someone has bikes.
Yes. And with every bike purchase at BioWheels, you will get one of those fits for free doll hairs.
Absolutely. Mitch, amazing. But also Mitch adjacent is the Ritual All Natural Skincare, founded by our John Woolry, who was on this podcast originally back in the day. Yeah, providing small batch handmade chamois cream, custom blended for you, your team, your shop, your dog, your mother-in-law, whoever you want to make chamois cream for. You want it to smell like eucalyptus, rose hips, whatever, you can make it happen. The Ritual can make it happen for you so that you've got something custom. If you want to know more about getting custom chamois cream for whatever application it needs, get a hold of John, get a hold of me, get a hold of TGL. We will put you in the right communication with the Ritual master craftsmen who have little tubs, and they make it themselves, and we'll get you sorted out. Make sure you have exactly what you need for all of your undercare needs.
And last but certainly not least is Hand Up Gloves. So hopefully you guys know Hand Up Gloves makes great cycling gloves, fun apparel, but they're also making things for golf, for ski, for other things outside, for casual wear. This thank you. You did not mention jorts last week, and I actually had to put that in the social media comments because it was a miss. It was a miss. It was a week without mentioning jorts. So
even John doesn't know. I always talk about my jorts from Hand Up every single week. It's like part of the jorts. I love jorts. They're great.
So
what to send John some jorts?
Think of all of the technical apparel that you can imagine, but for cycling specific stuff, gloves, apparel, range of designs from mild to wild, allow your personality to shine through. Click the link in our show notes. It's a little more complicated than our other ones. You got to actually click the link in the show notes and then use code Pebble $sign at checkout to save 10% off of everything that's in stock in the web store. But yeah, Hand Up Gloves. They're one of our oldest sponsors outside of really the Ritual. But that was my company, so it's like they're our first legit sponsor.
So we love hearing from all of you. Make sure you visit and subscribe to all our feeds, social, the YouTube, all the things you need to do. Go to thegravelot.com to stay up to date on everything we've got going on. Join all the live shows, mostly on Tuesdays. Sometimes there's a lot of life stuff happening in the next couple months. I'm getting married. There's all sorts of crazy stuff going on. So
we're gonna have to have some conversations.
Adjustments.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have some conversations with you guys over the next couple of weeks. But those are coming. We're still ironing out details. So more to come.
But make sure to subscribe all those places and engage with us in all that spaces. We love hearing from all of you.
Our new outro and intro music for season 4 of TGL is from Wadaboy. So many thanks to him for letting us use not only the intro music, but also the waiting room music and the outro music for the live stream. Check him out on all the major platforms, or click the link in the show notes and let him know that you appreciate what he is doing.
All right, John, we have paid the bills. All right, he's still with us. He has not just logged off the call, which is good. So our Pebbles, which is what we call all the people who listen to the show, because we are all pebbles in the gravel lot of life, right? What do you want the Pebbles to take home from what we've talked about tonight?
one concept that I've worked on over the years is making the process be your goal rather than, finish this cool race, finish in X place, during that event. I think I've become much happier because I've focused on, I'm trying to get my happy place is when I hit that groove, in an event where I'm buzzing along on the trail and I'm loving life. Like, that's my destination for me. Doesn't matter how long the event is, how short or where it is, that's my place. So as long as I can get there, like, I have had a successful day, mission, ultramarathon, whichever it is. And I think that is the key to happiness.
I love that that's the way you approach all of this.
And I would highly recommend a poem by David White called Close that brings those concepts into view. Actually, if I could read.
No, I was going to say, do you happen to have it up? Please, we would love some poetry.
So this is just the last paragraph of it, but it's the most direct. Human beings do not find their essence through fulfillment or eventual arrival, but by staying close to the way they like to travel, to the way they hold the conversation between the ground on which they stand and the horizon to which they go. We are, in effect, always close to the ultimate secret, that we are more real in our simple wish to find a way than any destination we could reach. The step between not understanding that and understanding that is as close as we get to happiness.
We were talking about it a little bit before we brought you in about how both of us are trying to find, the process again of we know what we enjoy, and there's so many things in life that can sidetrack you, and a global pandemic is a pretty big one. Losing a job is a big one. Like those things can come and kind of kick you in the nads. But if you can get back to, that's kind of what both of us were saying, is like getting back to just focusing on the process and not worrying about what the outcome or what the objective was working towards. Mm-hmm. There's just so much, it just offers so much more clarity because it's offering some sort of odd structure to the kind of chaos that life can throw at you, I guess. I don't know. Your poem was much more succinct.
That's why it's a poet. Not you and me.
Not a podcast. Yeah.
Podcast. Thank you, John. This has been absolutely fantastic. What an absolute blast to have you join us on the show. All thanks to our friend Ian and all the Pebbles who wrote in and was like, you should definitely have John Stamstad on the show. Like, this is exceptional. Thank you for spending time.
Very, very fun for me too. You guys did an excellent job. Very good conversation. Very stimulating and fun. Really appreciate it.
We're really glad that you were able to be here for sure. And not the last time, hopefully. We're going to have science podcast with John Stamstad. That will come next.
That one I will do lots of prep for. That one almost mandates like as much prep as the Rob DiMartini podcast.
Yeah, we'll get some scientists on that can do some stuff. So huge thanks to all of you Pebbles for being here as always. Can't do this without your support. Make sure you go over, subscribe, click the like button, do all the things you're supposed to do for the magic of the internet. Gravelot.com. Hit up all our stuff, all the shows that are somewhat our friends that we're trying to boost up in that space. Become a Patreon supporter today. Send us like your up-to-date ideas for additional guests. That's how we end up with awesome people like John on the show. And really, that's it for this week. So be sure to subscribe, follow, and engage because, as you know, decisions and trails are made by those who show up. So if we don't see you on the trails this week, we'll see you next time. Bye, John.
Bye, Doug.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.